All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mindgasms. So, for the purposes of this video, I am Andrew, aka Pro-Abortion Mindgasms, and I, of course, am going to talk about the recent massive news of the American Supreme Court leaking that they're going to overturn Roe versus Wade. This is set to happen in July, apparently. I put the wrong caption for that there, because I was going to respond to a different Ben Shapiro video, but I'm going to respond to his newest video from today where he's basically just making fun of lefties like Kamala Harris getting understandably outraged at this decision. So I'll just basically share Squeaky Ben Shapiro's thoughts here and comment on it, because we know his takes are just fucking brilliance all the time, aren't they? Okay.
The Biden administration has decided to deploy their finest rhetorician. We're talking, of course, about Kamala Harris, one of the most charming.
Shit, sorry. I forgot I had that at 2 times speed. He talks so quickly already that him at 2 times speed is probably unbearable for some of you.
The Biden administration has decided to deploy their finest rhetorician. We're talking, of course, about Kamala Harris, one of the most charming, brilliant, concise personalities in American life. She's amazing at this. So she put out a statement as well. She said the Supreme Court has now confirmed the draft.
I like that, actually, because I'm not a big fan of Kamala Harris either, and not many people are.
Opinion that would overturn Roe versus Wade is genuine. Again, notice, not a single Democrat has a problem with this leak. Not a single one. So all the norms people, just remember, they don't give a crap about norms. It's just that norms are just an excuse for them to do what they want. Roe ensures a woman's right to choose to have an abortion. It also, at its root, protects...
Yeah, because you totally know that, bro. He's just totally mind-reading, and he's being a hypocrite because conservatives only care about norms as far as they agree with their ideology, just as much as that's also true with lefties, in my opinion.
Protects the fundamental right to privacy. To kill an unborn child? What is clear is that opponents of Roe want to punish...
Of course, he's doing the fucking most extreme stereotypical conservative framing of the issue of abortion, that it's literally killing a baby. So, obviously, most of the time, the overwhelming majority of the time with abortions, it's not literally killing a baby. It's not a, like... Depends on whether you define what qualifies as a baby, of course, but it's far from being a baby when it's anything up to 6 weeks old or after that as well. And of course, the conservatives tend to believe that life begins at conception, which is scientifically false. But this is the only reason I can understand why some people are so-called pro-life, because because from my studying of postmodernist writers like Foucault and Derrida, I understand that there are different types of truth. So for conservatives, they have different psychological values that they place higher in their hierarchy of values than people who are more pro-choice, as I am and many other people are. And so they look at it differently, and to them, their religious truth that life begins at conception outweighs the scientific truth that life begins approximately 6 weeks after conception. But regardless of that, the point remains that if you literally think it's a baby from the second of conception, that's just completely fucking ridiculous. Like, Ben Shapiro is supposed to be this logic guy, and if you're talking about objective scientific facts and shit like that, then the rational scientific objective truth is that this isn't a baby until it's probably way beyond 6 weeks. This is why it's such a contentious debate, because it's such a philosophical issue to determine what qualifies as a life, right? But taking away the women's right to have an abortion means that you don't care if she gets raped, or she's a victim of incest, or she's a poor struggling mother, or she's a crack addict, or for any other reason she can't afford to financially support her child. And this is why in the book Freakonomics, two economists, I forget which one is which. One is a journalist and one is an economist, but one of them is Stephen J. Dubner. And they talk about how 20 years after Roe versus Wade passed, it resulted in a dramatic reduction in crime, because a lot of children were not born who would have grown up to be in poor families, in poor neighborhoods with very few opportunities, so they would have very likely gotten into a life of crime, which is not a determinist statement, of course, but there's a lot of evidence to suggest that freely available abortions prevents unwanted births, which actually causes a reduction in crime. So that's a right-wing argument for the access to abortion of women. And Ben Shapiro, he's supposedly, like, he's referred to himself as a civil libertarian elsewhere before, but he's not for the freedom and autonomy of a woman's body. He's for the authoritarian right of the state to have control over a woman's body, because a fetus has more of a right to life than someone who is already living. And even if the mother could perhaps die if that child is born. Anyway, let's get back to this.
Punish women and take away their rights to make decisions about their own bodies. Again,
that's true.
You know what the greatest punishment is? The death penalty. You know what you guys want to do? Preserve the death penalty for innocent unborn children.
He's fucking pro-death penalty. He's comparing abortions to the death penalty, but he's for the fucking death penalty. Oh my God, what a dumbass.
By their mothers and the doctors they work with. That's crazy. Republican legislators in states across the country are weaponizing the use of law against women. And they're going to try this war on women bullcrap that they tried in 2012. It ain't going to work. It just is not going to work. No one.
Dude, who gets abortions? You're the one who talks about all this trans shit all the time and complains about how people say that men can supposedly get pregnant and get abortions or something like that. You have to admit, if someone asks you directly, that it's women who gets abortions. It's a women's issue. It's about the babies coming out of women's vaginas.
No one believes that protecting the unborn is a quote-unquote war on women, other than people who are already indoctrinated in that belief. And Democrats they're trying.
Who's it a war on if it's not a war on women? Would the conservative perspective for him be it's actually a war on babies or some shit like that? Because if so, that would be fucking ridiculous, of course.
Desperately to shift the topic away from the economy. They're desperately trying to shift the topic away from crime. They're desperately trying to shift away from illegal immigration. And they're going to go back.
So they're trying to distract from issues like illegal immigration by complaining that abortion will now be illegal. These are even if you think these issues are equally as pressing, there has not been any legal developments in the United States Supreme Court recently to do with those issues, to my knowledge. Maybe there are, but this is the most major news that's has to do with the Supreme Court and the changing of laws and abortion itself. To my knowledge, there haven't been any major law changes in the Supreme Court to do with immigration or any other issues that he mentioned.
Back to social issues and this claim that Republicans are going prey on women in the night and all of this kind of stuff. It ain't going to work. It just is not going to.
Okay, who's saying that? He didn't mention who said that. So, I mean, maybe he's not strawmanning. Maybe I'll give him the benefit of the doubt, but he didn't say anyone's name who was supposedly doing that.
Rights of all Americans are at risk, says Kamala Harris. Really? My rights are not at risk. My wife's rights are not at risk. In fact, it turns out that the vast majority of Americans who don't have abortions, their rights are not at risk, actually. It turns out.
Oh, wow. Really? If you don't get an abortion, you're not at risk? So how would that be different then from whether you want to get an abortion. Why would that be? Why even mention that? Aren't you kind of admitting that implicitly admitting that if you want to get an abortion, you are at risk, even though you just said that you're not at risk? I mean, I don't know. It seems like kind of a contradiction there. Maybe I'm reading too much into it. Who knows?
And it turns out that the people who are having abortions, it's not their right to do so in the first place. No one can explain to me why.
What? It's not their right to have an abortion in the first place. I'll let him finish his statement because
there is a moral right to have an abortion. A moral right. Forget about.
Okay. No one can explain to him why there's a moral right to have an abortion. Simply put, it's a moral right for women to be able to have an abortion because it's their right to decide whether they want to have a child or not, because even if you grant the scientifically incorrect premise that life begins at conception, then it's still the woman's decision, and because it grows in her fucking body, and hopefully her significant other, if she has one too, whether it's a man or a woman, it's their decision. Whoever is responsible for making the child together, whether it's in vitro fertilization, if you're a gay or lesbian couple or whatever, it's their decision as to whether they have that baby or not. Why is it the government's right to? Why does the government have a moral right to decide whether children are allowed or children are allowed to be born or not, and whether women are allowed to have abortions or not? Like, this seems like it seems like fucking medieval to me, man. It seems like the first step of eugenics. Obviously, I'm biased, and I mean, I'm left leaning, but I wouldn't call myself a lefty or progressive or anything like that, because I disagree with lefties on some issues. But on the issue of abortion, I don't I understand the way that conservatives frame this, but I cannot understand why you would psychologically place the value of an unborn fetus above the life of a woman. And of course, in terms of capital punishment, as many people have brought up before, conservatives, they don't want you to kill babies, but if these people grow up to be criminals, then if they're bad enough criminals, they want you to kill them, which wouldn't have happened with some of those people anyway. Wouldn't have happened if those kids had gotten aborted in the first place, because they wouldn't have grown up to be criminals. And that sounds fucking callous, but that's a right-wing argument for abortion. Okay, this person is either trolling in the comments or you're just dumb. I think this Supreme Court decision is awesome. This could set a precedent to allow states to outlaw sodomy and gay marriage. Women look at big L today. Christ, you're either a fucking nut job Christian, or you're trolling. I've heard people talk about sodomy and gay marriage possibly being outlawed because of something to do with similar language in the Constitution, to do with the reason behind why they overturned Roe versus Wade. That's fucking, like, America is not the greatest country in the world, for fucking sure. Here in Canada, weed is federally legal. Weed is about to have the same status legally as abortion in America. Whoever runs your particular state decides whether you can get an abortion and whether you can legally smoke weed. And also, you have fucking shitty healthcare there in America. Fucking sucks to be in America right now. It's sure as fuck not the greatest country in the world, even though Ben Shapiro says that shit all the time. Why would it, oh man, gay marriage just got legalized recently too. I think I heard someone say 7 years ago. Like, what would someone like Dave Rubin do if he would not be allowed to be gay married to his husband anymore? Would he still be a conservative at that point if the conservative legislation led to him not being allowed to be married to his husband anymore. And fucking sodomy making that illegal. What is it? The fucking 1800s? Like, some straight people have sex. I've talked about this in terms of postmodernism, and Foucault talking about this in his book History of Sexuality. Sodomy used to be outlawed because people associated it with homosexuality, so they labeled it as a homosexual act. Even if you do it as a straight couple, if a guy fucks a woman in the ass, or if a woman fucks a guy in the ass with a strap on, that's apparently homosexual, which is fucking ridiculous shit, man. None of this shit should be illegal.
What about legal rights? Explain to me the moral right to kill an unborn human being in your womb. Explain how that's moral. If the right to privacy is weakened, every person...
Because the life of the already born woman takes precedence over the so-called unborn child in that woman. It's her body, which is where the fetus is growing, and it's up to her and her significant other, if she has one. It's not the state's right. That's way too fucking authoritarian. You're controlling that's the state controlling the bodily autonomy of a person. You're not a fucking civil libertarian if you have that position.
Person could face a future in which the government can potentially interfere in the personal decisions you make about your life. This is the time to fight for women and for our country with everything we have. Oh, it sounds like insurrectionary language to me.
What a
fighting like hell. I still, that's insurrectionary language.
But again, I'm not a fan of Kamala Harris any more than I am of Ben Shapiro, but what a fucking dick.
Kamala Harris didn't leave it at that. She also decided that she was going to be one amazing rhetorician, channeling another amazing rhetorician. So here she is channeling Greta Thunberg. How dare you? How dare you?
Greta Thunberg.
Kamala Harris being as charmless as normal.
Yeah, Greta Thunberg is admittedly awful too.
Those Republican leaders who are trying to weaponize the use of the law against women. Well, we say, how dare they? How dare they tell a woman what she can do and cannot do with her own body? How dare they?
Again, I mean, I know that's a cliche, but I don't see how there's a flaw in that argument. Like, what gives the government the right to decide what a woman does with her own body? Because, like I said, even if you admit that life begins at conception, which it scientifically does not, then what gives the government the right to tell a woman whether she can stop a child growing in her body or not? Why shouldn't that be up to the woman and her significant other if she has one?
How dare they try to stop her from determining her own future? How dare they try to deny women their rights and their freedoms?
It is not your right for, again, this all of it relies on ignoring the fact that you are killing an unborn human being.
But you're not necessarily killing an unborn human being. Again, Mr. Logic Man has to admit that he's not being rational or scientific or objectively truthful or logical if he's saying that life begins at conception and it begins before 6 weeks, because it scientifically speaking begins after approximately 6 weeks from conception. So he has to admit that he's a postmodernist in terms of truth, like an evil postmodernist, just like Jordan Peterson is actually, without realizing it, because he believes that there are different types of truth and that there are more different types of truths that are more suitable for certain situations. So Ben Shapiro would have to admit, given the fact that he has this position, that he is not being rational or logical or basing his views on science or truth or objective reality. He's basing it on his religious truth that life begins at conception, taking precedence over the scientific fact that you are not killing a human being if you get an abortion before 6 weeks. If you do after, that's where it gets into an interesting moral and philosophical debate. But it's undeniably scientifically the case, at least, that not all abortions are killing a future human being. And even if you say that abortion is killing a future human being, then what gives the government the right to prevent a woman from doing that if the human being is growing in her body? Again, I heard a philosophical argument about this. I forget who was mentioning it, but it was someone who was on the historian Thaddeus Russell's podcast. He was saying also, what gives the unborn fetus the right to grow in a woman's body? I mean, and again, like, no one wants to get an abortion. Like, the thought of it, like it's a hard decision for anyone to make. There's this fucking myth among conservatives that there are women going around just letting anyone impregnate them and getting abortions all the time. Like, that doesn't fucking happen. I know women who had unplanned children and they did not get abortions because it was too much of a hard decision to make, and they decided to have kids instead. And you know, a lot of people adjust and their kids end up doing well, but with some people, they don't have the opportunities. They're single mothers, or they're poor in a variety of ways, or maybe they're drug addicts, or maybe they're homeless, or maybe they got raped, or there are any number of reasons why a woman would justifiably want to get an abortion. Late term complications in the pregnancy too. I know someone whose sister, when her sister was born, they had to choose between the life of her and her mother, and they chose the life of the sister, and so the mother died. So that happens sometimes too.
This is what it relies on the deepest possible level. It relies on the dehumanization of a preborn human being who happens to be your own child.
You're either, whether people admit it or not, you're either you have to choose between dehumanizing an unborn fetus or dehumanizing a living woman. You're doing one or the other, whether you admit it or not. I don't care who you are. You're doing one or the other.
It's an amazing moral argument. And I'm sorry, how dare you is not an actual argument. You want to make an argument for why?
Like, neither is you're murdering babies. That's not also not an argument. That's not true.
A woman's right to career advancement outweighs the right to life of the human being that is in her womb.
Who are you to make that decision for her? You're not a civil libertarian if you think you have the right to make that decision for her.
Make that argument. Do it. No more euphemisms.
Okay, I'm going to stop here because I've been talking long enough, and I don't need to talk about the whole video. I'll just talk about what he said about Kamala Harris specifically there. But yeah, of course, like, I have the typical left-wing position on this, although unlike a lot of left-wing people, I regrettably try to understand why some people are so-called pro-life, and I guess I understand why some people have that position, but I don't, because some people have better arguments for it than others, but I still fundamentally disagree with it. But I don't necessarily think you're an awful person if you're so-called pro-life, even though I am very pro-choice. But anyway, of course, this is terrible news in my opinion. I would hate to be living in America right now if I were a woman. Like I said, it's not the fucking greatest country in the world. You will soon not have the federal right to an abortion or the federal right to smoke weed, and you have a shitty healthcare system that you have to pay tons of money for. And of course, Ben Shapiro is a fucking dickhead about it as usual, and just making the typical stupid one-dimensional conservative argument, and that's not actually rational or logical at all, even though he claims to be rational logic man, and he's not being a civil libertarian at all, even though I've heard him claim before that he is a civil libertarian, and he's just making fun of Kamala Harris, even though, like I said, I'm not a fan of her, and just making this stupid argument that the implication is obviously that life begins at conception, and he's directly saying that you're murdering babies if you get an abortion, which again is scientifically and logically false and objectively false and not true. And he claims to value all of these things. So anyway, okay. I'm going to respond to your dumbass comments again, person, whether you're like a radical evangelical or just a troll. Majority of abortions are performed by women in their 20s, Bullshit, citation needed. A degenerate society that encourages promiscuity will have these issues. Bullshit, citation needed. That's a faith claim based on nothing. We need to Christianize the culture again. That's really stupid and makes no sense. Stop parroting what your worthless liberal arts teachers are telling you. I don't have any liberal arts teachers, so you're also mind reading and you're a dumbass, because I don't get these arguments from liberal arts teachers. Anyway, whether you're a troll or a crazy evangelical Christian, thanks for commenting anyway, because it gets good interaction with people for watching the video. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. I think I've talked long enough about this. I feel sorry for you if you're a woman in America right now. I feel glad that I live here in Canada, although I don't think any country is the greatest country in the world, because I've only been to Canada and the US, so how the fuck should I know? I think it's dumb when anyone says they know what the greatest country in the world is, unless they've seen all of them, and I know a few people who have, but hardly anyone has. Anyway, this is awful. Ben Shapiro is a dick. Hopefully there could be this leak actually ends up getting reversed, although apparently that's phenomenally unlikely. And yeah, these are my thoughts. Of course, I don't claim to have the objectively correct opinion and everyone else is wrong, although I think everyone else that is like all the so-called pro-life people are wrong, but I'm open to talking about it. But still, this is fucking awful goddamn news in my opinion, and Ben Shapiro is a dickhead, like I said. But anyway, thanks again for watching. Click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Click that subscribe button. Going to probably do a podcast this weekend with my friends Dusty and Tristram, who usually do our fantasy nerding out sessions on fantasy books, and we're going to get into Era 2 of Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, the fantasy series that this book in particular starts out as being basically a fantasy western with the same magic system from Era 1 of the more fantasy era Mistborn. And check out my last podcast that I did with Dusty and Chris last weekend about the new Batman movie, The Batman, and why people like Ben Shapiro consider it woke because there are black characters and they're good guys, which is ridiculous. And, you know, just the film in general, how it's a film noir detective Batman, and that's really interesting. And yeah, of course, check out my Patreon page. The link is in the description of the video. As always, whether you want to give me $1, $5, $10, $100, $1,000, $5,000, whatever you want, just check out the link in the description of the video. And like I always say, I love you all. Keep being the tiny beam of light that shines through the almost impenetrable darkness in the universe. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all. And some terrible shit is happening in America. I hope all of my American friends can do better and not destroy the whole fucking country. I hope you do better there. All right. Adios until next time, everyone.